it is such a privilege to be part of this. Those two stories that we just heard and the ones that are coming are amazing. And naturally, my response is to feel incredibly intimidated and overwhelmed. So I think I ought to start with a true confession. I'm old. And I have never memorized a talk ever. I just talk. But when Rich asked me to do this, he said, no notes. This is the authentic storytelling thing. And I wrote out the story fully and began to try and memorize it. It was hopeless. So, like Blanche Dubois in Streetcar of Desire or whatever, I throw myself on the mercy of strangers. Here's the best I can do. Bear with me. Okay. A raised eyebrow. A tilt of the head. Pursed lips. A subtle shrug was the language in the old New England Yankee family that I grew up in to express anger and even rage. We were an incredibly charming and handsome family. So much so that in 1949, a photo shoot of our family was put in Look magazine. Do some of you remember Look magazine? Put in Look magazine as a model American family, being out there. We were so well-mannered and frankly polite and well-behaved that you would never actually guess that of the six of us, my mother committed suicide, my sister and my father had florid psychosis, and my two brothers ended up with lifelong addictions. And of course, this family also produced a family therapist. Big shock. And many of you could probably guess, without thinking about it very much, about what kind of skills I brought to family therapy at the beginning. I was so gifted at hypervigilance that I could read and interpret people's feelings before they even knew they had them. And I could put them into words, and they would go feel known. And I was also so pathologically conflict avoidant that I could literally calm anybody down. I was really good at taking people and calming them down and like oil over on troubled waters or smoothing ruffled feathers. I was just really great in tamping down feelings because that's how you survive. Well, some of you in this audience probably recognize that style. But then I collided into structural family therapy training with Mnuchin and Haley. And in that world where chaos and conflict were part of the plan, where oftentimes you had to have an intense family crisis in order to have the catalyst for meaningful change, I was like a duck out of water. And some of you know this story, but I remember watching the famous Mnuchin hot dog lunch session tape. And I just have to quickly tell it to you because it's important to my story. Anyway, Mnuchin's got this family, and they're having lunch, as he did, and he's letting the warring parents actually each demonstrate how their way was the right way. And so first you get the mother, and the mother is so sweet and loving and kind as she's encouraging this ferocious, tiny 14-year-old defiant girl, cajoling her. She sort of goes off into a little baby talk, and nothing's happening, and the girl is just refusing to touch her food. And by the end of the mother's 20 minutes, she was screaming at the top of her lungs, "You're ruining the family!" So the father steps in, calm, steady, and starts lecturing the girl on nutrition and how eating was really going to be helpful for her, not just physically, but emotionally. So he's working that shtick, And he gets his allotted time, and he gets more and more frustrated. And this is a true story. He gets more and more frustrated, and he starts yelling at the girl, and then he picks up her hot dog, takes her by the neck, and tries to put the hot dog in her mouth. That's true. So I'm watching this going, oh my God, this is insane. Am I supposed to be able to do this? This is crazy. Because Mnuchin was just hanging out. He had a colleague there, and he was just hanging out. All this crazy shit was going on. So I said I could never do that. But then I found out that the kids started eating the very next day. And furthermore, she ate so well, she got discharged from the hospital with 3 days later. I was dumbfounded. That was when I met Jimmy. Jimmy's the title of the story, and right from the beginning, he was a presence. The mother and the father walked into the first interview, and they were really anxious and upset. The father was just charged up. The mother kind of walked in like this, and then Jimmy walked in. Yeah, he was another version of Bruce. In any case, I picked up the subtle cues that Jimmy might be difficult. When the father said, "Jimmy, would you like to start the session?" And Jimmy said, "Fuck you." Really. And then the mother jumps right in and says, "Now, Jimmy," and he interrupts the mother and says, "And fuck you too." Okay, I'm a little worried about how the case is going so far. But you know, in structural family therapy terms, what we were supposed to do in these days with defiant, ridiculous, off-the-charts kids was we were supposed to empower the parents, create the hierarchy, and bring them together, help them create a united front, help them confront the kids, set boundaries, have limits, have consequences. That's what was supposed to happen. This family was really difficult. Whenever I got one of the parents propped up to challenge Jimmy, the other one would slip off to, "Oh, poor Jimmy. He's having such a hard time. You know, he has social anxiety and ADHD." And so that would completely undermine the tough one. And what was worse, on the tough love spectrum that usually divides families and couples, they kept role reversing. One session, the mom would be ready to take on, and the dad would go, "Oh, poor Jimmy." And the next session, the dad would be ready, and the mom would go, "Oh, poor Jimmy." And Jimmy just sat there kind of like, "Fuck you." So it wasn't going well. So anyway, I have the need to tell you that this is a literally true story, because get ready. So anyway, the father comes in one night, and he's charged up because he says, "You know, Jimmy's got pot on his back pocket." Now, I'm thinking, this is structural family therapy. We'll do an enactment. I invite the dad to confiscate the pot. So the dad says, "Jimmy, give up the pot." Jimmy says, yeah, a big surprise there. So anyway, the next thing you know, the father is grabbing at Jimmy and trying to get the pot. And they end up on the floor, wrestling in my office. And I'm sitting there like this. Like, I am so untrained for this. But the next thing that happens after that is the mother gets down on the floor and is trying to help the dad get the pot. So now I'm thinking, this is really cool. We should have this on videotape. And Mnuchin would just love this. So I'm suddenly feeling like this is working. And the next thing you know, Jimmy bursts free. He stands up. The dad stands up. Jimmy does this. He pulls his arm back to cold cock the dad and knocks over a lamp in my office. At which point I'm thinking, no, this is probably not going well. But I have to do something. But but I've lost my voice. I have no voice. I just have this strangled squeak coming up. And I say, I got to call the police. Really. So anyway, Jimmy wisely just walks out of the room. Cool customer. Anyway, so the parents get back into their chairs, and the mother's crying, the dad is sweating heavily, and they are just sitting there, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, what do I say now? This has got to be good. And the next thing I know, Jimmy comes in carrying a wastebasket like this. And he has this wastebasket. He goes over to the parents, and he goes like this. Boom! It's full of water. He soaks them. And then he throws down the fucking wastebasket and leaves again. I'm, by this time, really glad this isn't on tape. So, anyway, here's what happens. The mother and the father are sitting there, and they honestly, this is not to be disrespectful, but they look like drowned rats. They just look so pathetic. And I'm kind of trying to gather myself to engage in a meaningful way, when all of a sudden, the father starts looking at me with an incredibly wild-eyed, maniacal look. And he says, wait a minute. Wait a fucking minute. Do the math. There's 3 of us and just 1 of him. Now, the truth of the matter is, I never saw Jimmy again. Never came back to a session. But the parents and I were united, attached to the hip, about taking that fucker down. There was no problem with setting limits, having boundaries, having consequences. Jimmy would try threatening stuff, and they'd say, fine, we'll call the police. It's okay, no problem. Boom. And he was grounded and grounded and grounded, and he sat on it, and the parents were just glued to the hip, and it was great. So 3 to 4 or 5 months later, Jimmy had settled down. Go figure. But, you know, the truth of the matter is, I was really glad that they went away. I wasn't really confident in the overall outcome. So, anyway, 6 years later, I'm getting on a plane to go do a workshop in New York, and I see the mother ahead of me in line, and I try and turn away before she sees me. Like, oh, I'm going to go get a newspaper. But she sees me, and she comes over to me and she says, you'll never guess what's happened with our Jimmy. And I'm thinking, our Jimmy? Holy shit. Whoa. And she says, yep, Jimmy just was elected vice president of his junior class. And he's honoring in his major, which is accounting. Accounting? So I am dumbfounded all over again with the outcome of this story. Now, this happened 41 years ago. And I've actually told this story quite a few times at workshops that I used to do for substance abuse and stuff, because it's such a good example about how crazy substance abusing family systems can get. And so, you know, it's always been a good story to tell. And then Rich asked me to come up with a story that maybe had changed my life in some way. And I thought about the Jimmy story because I know it's a good story to tell a late night audience. Why not? But he got me thinking in the way that Rich does. Sometimes it's annoying, but he got me thinking about, well, how did Jimmy change my life? And in reality, he didn't. That's what I figured out. Decades worth of individual psychotherapy helped me finally not be that little boy from long ago who is scared shitless all the time and had to take care of everybody else in order to survive. That was a lot of hard work. Jimmy doesn't get the credit for it. And yet, the truth of the matter is, I oftentimes think of Jimmy when the you-know-what's hitting the fan in the therapy room. The escalation's going up, the tensions are going up, and what it allows me to do, remembering that bizarre story, is instead of reflexively stepping in and thinking, I've got to calm things down, I've got to get them buttoned up, I've got to get the lid on, I actually can sit there and think about what's right here. I can breathe into just being in the moment without having to take care of it in order to take care of me. Because all that other stuff was just the way that I knew how to take care of me, and it worked for some families. But the crises, the conflict, the challenges, the explosions work for some other families. So I just needed to be able to sit still. Now, I was working on all this, and the very thing happened a week ago. So, this is fresh on my mind. I'm sitting with a couple. They're having an escalating conflict. They've been pretty buttoned up, and I'm thinking, this is a good thing. We've got to let them sort of get into it. And I'm feeling pretty comfortable with the conflict. The next thing you know, the wife storms out of the room and slams the door and is gone. Now, in reality, the old me would have quickly felt like I had to chase after her, I had to cajole her to come back, I had to make it right in some way, and I had to step in and save the day. I'm a professional rescuer. Anyway, but I didn't. I could just sit still. I could calm myself. And then I turned to the husband and I said, what do you think we ought to do? And he said, why don't we give her some time? And we did. So the wife walked back in. She walked back in and came right up to me, looked me in the eye and said, I'm sorry I walked out of the session and slammed your door. But that was a really good thing I did. I was about to say some very hateful, maybe irreparable things to my husband. And I had to do that to protect him and us. And she did that, and she clearly felt very good about it. And what I felt was, and it really, really touched me, is she did it on her own. She owned that, because I didn't chase after her. I didn't go to rescue her. I didn't have to do that to take care of me. So where does this end? It ends with my feeling like I want to say, thanks, Jimmy. And then I got to thinking, gee, I wish I could be talking with him about the story. And then I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to hear his story? Thank you. That's good.